An original podcast from podlatino.com.
São Gonçalo is not Rio de Janeiro. That is important to understand from the beginning. São Gonçalo sits on the other side of Guanabara Bay, separated from the postcard city by water and by centuries of inequality. It is a city of more than 1 million people who live largely without the luxuries the world associates with Brazil, without the beaches of Ipanema, without Christ the Redeemer watching from above, without glass hotels and tourists with cameras. São Gonçalo is a city of hard work, tight communities, and people who rise early and come home late. And it is also the city that gave the world Vinicius José Paixão de Oliveira Júnior. Vinicius was born on the 12th of July in the year 2000. The world was stepping into a new millennium full of promises and fears, and in a working-class neighborhood of São Gonçalo, a humble family was welcoming their son with the kind of love that is always the one thing that is never in short supply, no matter how much everything else might be. His father, also named Vinicius, worked whatever jobs were available. His mother, Maria, did the same. These were difficult times, as they always are in places where poverty does not knock before entering. But there was one thing nobody could take away from that boy: the street. And on the streets of São Gonçalo, as in every corner of Brazil, football is not a sport. It is a language. It is the way boys say things to each other that words cannot. It is the place where the rules of the real world are suspended for a while, and where the only thing that matters is what you can do with the ball. Vinicius learned that language before any other, running on surfaces that were not pitches, playing without boots on many occasions, learning to control the ball on uneven ground where any bounce could be a surprise. What the Flamengo scouts saw when they arrived to watch that skinny 11-year-old was something not found in any coaching manual. There was a relationship between Vinicius and the ball that seemed almost biological, as if the two had been born together and had known each other all their lives. There was explosion, there was pace, there was a joy in the way he played that was almost contagious. But above all, there was something harder to define: a conviction, a certainty in every movement that said, without words, that this boy knew exactly where he was going, even if nobody else could see it yet. Flamengo signed him, and from that moment, Vinicius's life changed forever. But changing forever does not always mean changing easily. At the Flamengo Academy, one of the largest and most demanding clubs in South America, Vinicius had to grow up quickly. He had to learn to live away from his family from a young age, to deal with the pressure of expectations, to understand that talent is only the starting point, and that hard work is the only road that leads anywhere. He learned it, with sacrifice, with discipline, with that same joy that never left him even in the hardest moments. He made his professional debut for Flamengo in 2017, at 16 years old. And before that year was over, Real Madrid of Spain had already closed his purchase for a figure the football world took time to believe: 45 million euros for a 16-year-old, for a boy from São Gonçalo who a few years earlier had been running on dirt streets. That figure was not just money, it was a declaration. It was a signal that someone in an office in Madrid had seen the same thing the Flamengo scouts had seen on that street years before. The challenge, if you can call a reality a challenge, is that Real Madrid did not wait for Vinicius to finish growing. They bought him at 16, but left him in Brazil until he turned 18. When he arrived in Madrid in the summer of 2018, he was a teenager at one of the most demanding clubs on the planet, a club where trophies are the minimum expectation, where pressure is constant, and where mistakes are not easily tolerated. The first years were hard, not in a dramatic way, not with scandals or visible conflicts, hard in the most silent and most difficult way, with doubt, with those who said he lacked the goal, with those who said he lost too many balls, with those who pointed to every bad match as confirmation that the fee Madrid had paid for him was a mistake. The Spanish press, which can be generous with those who succeed and merciless with those who hesitate, gave him a brief grace period and then began to demand. And then something appeared that nobody expected, or perhaps that everyone should have expected but failed to see: racism. Vinicius had to face, in the 21st century, in one of the most modern stadiums in Europe, racist abuse from the stands, chants, gestures, words that should not exist in any language, and Vinicius responded the only way he knew how to respond, by playing, by dancing when he scored a goal, because in Brazil dancing is an expression of joy and identity that nobody has the right to take from anyone, by speaking when it was necessary, by denouncing when it was needed, and never, not once, stopping being who he was. That resistance, that refusal to erase himself, to make himself invisible so that others might feel more comfortable, is perhaps the greatest thing Vinicius has done off the pitch. Because in a world where black footballers are frequently expected to be grateful and quiet, Vinicius chose to be visible. He chose to say that racism is a crime. He chose that his joy was not a provocation, but simply who he is. And that choice had a cost, because it always has a cost, but it also had an effect. Millions of people around the world, and in particular millions of young black people in Brazil and across Africa, saw in him something that is not always easy to find in elite sport, someone who looks like them and who does not ask for permission to exist. On the pitch, the story kept writing itself in golden letters. The 2021-22 season was the moment the world stopped debating and started recognizing. Vinicius was decisive in Real Madrid's Champions League triumph, culminating in a goal in the final against Liverpool in Paris, a goal that was worth as much for what it was as for what it meant, the confirmation that the boy from São Gonçalo had come to stay at the very top of world football. The following season was even better, and the one after that too. Carlo Ancelotti, the Italian manager who has the rare ability to make great players feel free without losing the team structure, understood from the very beginning how to get the best out of Vinicius. He gave him confidence, he gave him responsibility, and Vinicius responded with performances, with goals, with assists, with matches that linger in the memory for a long time. Today, Vinicius Júnior is not only the best player at Real Madrid, he is the best player in the world according to many of those who understand football. And he is also the spiritual captain of the Brazilian national team, the leader of a generation that has been waiting years to end the World Cup drought, stretching back to 2002. Brazil has not won the World Cup in nearly a quarter of a century. And the weight of that history, of those 5 titles, and of the permanent expectation that surrounds the Seleção in every tournament, now falls on the shoulders of a boy who learned to play football on the streets of São Gonçalo. At the 2026 World Cup, with Carlo Ancelotti also managing the Brazilian national team, Vinicius will arrive surrounded by extraordinary teammates. Rodrigo, Endrick, a generation of talents that makes Brazil feared in the world once again. But everyone knows that when the match gets difficult, when someone is needed to do something nobody else can do, all eyes will turn to the number 7, to the one who runs faster than the opposing defense, to the one who dances when he scores, because in São Gonçalo he learned that football is not only about winning but also about joy. There are players who play to win. There are players who play to prove a point. Vinicius Júnior plays to live. And that difference, that way of inhabiting the pitch as if it were his most natural place in the world, is exactly what makes him impossible to stop. The boy who ran on the streets of São Gonçalo now runs in the biggest stadiums in the world, and all of Brazil runs with him.